Aloha, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me and United States Senator Mazie Hirono to discuss her new book, Heart of Fire, An Immigrant Daughter's Story. My name is Denby Fawcett. I'm a columnist for Honolulu Civil Beat. I first met Mazie Hirono more than 30 years ago when I was a TV reporter covering politics for KITV. At that time, Mazie Hirono was a member of the Hawai'i State House. House representative was her first political job. After that, she became Hawaii's lieutenant governor, serving for 2 terms under Governor Ben Cayetano. More recently, she was in the State House for 3 terms before her successful bid for US Senate in 2012. Now, Senator Hirono, when you first ran for Senate, you met with a group at a fundraising event to try and persuade them why you were a very good person to support. And you said the Senate is not diverse enough. You would bring quadruple diversity to the US Senate. And I wonder if you could enumerate the quadruple diversity you brought and how that was received by your audience that night.
Well, I ticked off well, first of all, aloha, Denby. It's great to be with you and to all the people who are tuning in. I say quadruple diversity because one, I would add to the number of women in the Senate. So as a woman, I would be the first Asian woman if elected. I am an immigrant and I am a Buddhist. I would be the one and only Buddhist to get elected. and somebody in the audience yelled, "Yeah, but are you gay?" And I said, "Nobody's perfect." So that made its rounds. Every once in a while it pops up. And when I was campaigning with my colleagues, soon-to-be colleagues that year for the US Senate, Chuck Schumer sometimes would join us. He would say, "Mazie, tell that story. It's my favorite campaign story." So it did make its rounds.
Yeah, that's a very funny story. And your book is remarkable. I just love it. And you can see by all the markers, the parts I've noted that I especially like, but it also kind of made me a little sad reading it because I've known you all these years and you always struck me as such a serious and determined person that when I interviewed you, I just wouldn't deign to say, "Oh, where did you come from? What's your life like? Who's your family?" Where the typical question here, where did you graduate from high school? And reading this book, I was reminded of what a remarkable, it's kind of a coincidence. We both grew up in territorial Hawaii. I came here in 1949 with my parents, and you came here in 1955. So we lived in Hawaii in the most remarkable time, kind of in the olden days before everything changed. And I want to ask you, the title of your book, this is dedicated to your mother, Laura Hirono. And I wondered to ask you why you picked that title and your special devotion to your mother.
My mother was a remarkable person and I recently lost her. So, she stays with me, of course, but she has such a fighting spirit. She had what I would call a heart of fire. And she also was a very determined person, but she didn't have to be noisy about it. She had fires, also embers that burn for a long time. And I think that she passed on those embers to me. And, fire is something that flares up and then it can be somewhat calm, but she had a heart of fire. In my book, my memoir is dedicated to her. And the other thing, Denby, when you say that there were a lot of things you didn't know about me, it just goes to show that we all have stories to tell. And so I'm really grateful that I was able to do this memoir dedicated to my remarkable fighting spirit mom.
Yes, in the book, you very carefully lay out that she had so many obstacles, but she never was really beaten down, only once, which we can talk about later. But I wanted to tell more about, the remarkable thing for a woman. She was born here in Hawaii, but her family moved to Japan when she was a teenager. So she moved into her adulthood then. And married your father, and I wanted you to talk more about the remarkable things she did to escape him and to make a whole life for herself, starting in Japan at his house.
When my mother was about 15, my grandparents, her parents decided to go back to Japan. And so it was really that she told me that it was like going back in time. And of course, this was during World War II soon came with Japan, and there she is. And so she met my father during this time frame, and she was brought up in a pretty sheltered way by my grandmother, her mother. And when my grandmother told her, don't marry him, that's the one time she decided that she would stand up for herself. And she married my father, but she did not know, because he hid from her the fact that he was a compulsive gambler and a compulsive drinker. He was an alcoholic, and he did not support the family at all. And in the traditional Japanese family that she found herself in, she lived with her in-laws, and then they treated her like a slave. She literally had to feed all the farm animals before she could feed her own children. So it was a terrible kind of a life for her, but she was born in Hawaii, and that was a happy time for her. And she finally determined that the only way that she could create a life for herself and her children was to literally escape from him without ever telling him or the family that she was doing that. So that was a remarkable thing. Women in Japan don't do that. If they run away from an abusive family, like my mother's situation, they would run away themselves. They certainly wouldn't bring their children, but my mother determined to do that. And I told her there's absolutely nothing I could do in my life that could be as hard as what she did.
That could match that. And even in Hawaii, in my parents' era, divorce here was unusual. I mean, I can't imagine Japan, but we didn't even know how to pronounce it. We called it divorce, like a Western song. You know, it was so unusual. People stayed married,
Yes.
even though they were terribly unhappy, and there was
Yes.
spouse abuse. And then she was worried when you got to your grandparents' house that he'd come after her and you. So she managed to get enough money to get you on the USS President Cleveland.
President Cleveland.
And one story I like there, can you tell about the first time you tried ice cream was on that ship where you're in steerage class, but you have some good treats like ice cream.
Well, that I do remember that as a positive part of the journey, but so much of it was me missing my grandmother, who raised me from the age of 3 to just before I came to this country. So there was a long period of time when I knew my grandmother better than I knew my own mother. I missed her so much. I cried a lot. I do remember that. But the ice cream part was that was yet another new thing. Taking a shower was a whole new thing. I was raised in a very rural part of Japan. And this is a whole new experience for me.
Yeah, I think in your writing, it's the detail that makes this book so interesting, because everyone that reads it can identify, because you said when you tried it was strawberry ice cream, and you thought there were these little dots in it, and you thought that that was dirt.
So little pieces of dirt.
Took out each little dirt, and it was actually chopped up strawberries. But that I like the details in your book. It's very, very good storytelling. It puts you there on that ship with you, throwing away the dirt.
That was an important part of what I wanted to do in telling my story, is really to not be, analytical as such, but to recall what it felt like for me. That was a really important aspect of what I wanted to convey.
And then when you got to Hawaii, you didn't speak a single word Honolulu of English, and you're 8 years old, and kids are already started in school and they have their friends, and you were living in a boarding house. And can you describe the room you lived in?
It was one room, and we were lucky that it actually had a sink, because it's a rooming house and everybody shared the bathrooms. I think there were 2. And there was a long hallway with all the little rooms going off the hallway, and everybody shared one refrigerator and one stove at the end of the hallway. You can't even call it a kitchen. It was just area, and that's what it was. And I but that's how we started. We're literally sleeping in one bed, but it was just me and my older brother and my mom, and the sadness of having to leave my younger brother, always stay with my mom.
Yes, that was, your mother could not bring your younger brother Wayne because he was too little. And
Yes.
her only way of surviving was to get you and Roy in school. And there's no care or maid that's going to help her with her little 3-year-old.
Nope. And that's the thing, Debbie. And here we are, paid family leave and childcare. That is still an issue for us. And we didn't know that. Well, obviously, there was nothing like that. We knew nothing about a safety net. And here we are, so many decades later, and we are still having to address the issues of the need for affordable childcare and family leave. And mainly women are still the caregivers for children in our country. And we still need to provide those kinds of programs for women. Lo, these many years later, we still haven't done it. My hope is that we'll do it through the Build Back Better bill.
With the child care credit, your mother could have really just
yes.
additional, that the one time your mother broke down was very interesting when you were asked to bring a washcloth to school. And
we hardly had money for, what is a washcloth? I didn't even know. I mean, it was frivolous. And yet there was a school project at the elementary school, and we had to scrounge around. I think somebody came up with a sort of a really raggedy looking washcloth to make a little animal or something. And there were things that when I first started in school that I just didn't understand. And so I write about some of those things. I knew that we didn't have much, though. I also knew that my mother was struggling. I think I learned to put myself in her shoes really early in life. I had an extraordinary kind of connection with my mother because she just showed me through her just how hard she worked and all of that I never thought that I should be whining for this, that, or the other thing because I knew we didn't have the money. So some of my friends say that, my mother, who later in life just supported me in whatever strange thing I pursued, that she couldn't be my real mother because real mothers are supposed to bug you and drive you crazy. And my mother never did. She always supported me and all the different endeavors that I engaged in to determine what I was going to do with myself.
Well, she didn't bug you and push you, but through her example,
yes,
she showed you that
yes,
you can take on very difficult things, even though you're not, people would say you're not qualified, and the jobs that she got when could you tell about her working conditions, when she started, and then what she pushed herself to do when it would have been so hard?
Well, when we first came here, she worked for a Japanese language paper and very low salary, no benefits. If she got sick, no money. And this is why, as you mentioned, the child tax credit of up to $300. My gosh, if my mom could have had even $20, even $10 a month for each of her children, that would have been a big help because we would run out of money before the end of the month. But she had very little benefits, and what's amazing to me is that she decided to go and work for the Honolulu Advertiser at that time as a proofreader. Amazingly, that because she did not graduate from high school here, and Japanese she was so much more comfortable with Japanese, but she decided to go for the job and she got it, which is amazing to me because I think a lot of people would say, I'm not qualified to be a proofreader. I'm not going to do that. But my mother showed me to take risks. And that's one of the life lessons I learned from Mom, to take risks in life.
And then after your time in the house, you decided you needed more of a challenge. You're always looking for something, that's interesting. And you were in the house, I think, for 12 years.
14 years.
Yeah, so you served your time there. You didn't just pop in and then move on. But this is where you start, when you start getting higher in politics, that's when the screws start getting put on not to do stuff. And you said Ben Cayetano, he didn't want you to be his LG.
So I mean, yes, I decided I would run for lieutenant governor. And frankly, one of the main reasons I wanted to run for lieutenant governor was I thought that Ben was lieutenant governor at the time. I liked his independence. I liked his feistiness, but I also thought he would have a hard time getting past the primary. And I thought I could be of help to him once he did that and to become governor, lieutenant governor. But he didn't think that I had enough name recognition. So this is 1994. I'm a member of the state house, and in the smallest district in the entire state, Moilili Makali, physically the smallest district. And I know he and I, we both did polls, and he met with me at one point, and I knew he was going to try to talk me out of running for lieutenant governor, even if he could not control who ran for lieutenant governor, because that's an entirely separate, independently run race. But he didn't think I could help him win governor. So he said, nobody knows who you are, and you and I are too similar. We're both independent and all of that. So he tried to talk me out of it. He wanted somebody much better known to run for lieutenant governor.
Who did he want?
I think my friend Ann Kobayashi, who was much better known then. He also contemplated other people. But, I had made my determination that was what I was going to do. And so that's when I said, well, what you're telling me is all bullshit and I'm running. So.
You use those words?
Yes.
Yes, people think you started swearing in the US.
No, Demby, I tell you, we have all these expectations of how women should behave, and obviously an Asian woman and in our culture, it's not as though I swear every other word, but believe me, when you're in politics and there are a lot of challenges and frustrations. I tell you, if you're not moved to swearing once in a while, you're just not paying attention. And so, yes, I swear, but I held back a lot. And I use my voice more now, and that includes swearing. And I don't plan these things. Debbie, I read the article that you wrote, and somebody said that I really think about it, and no. I do not swear thinking I'm going to have for effect. No, this is very much me, because there's a lot to be angry about with what was going on, especially in the Trump time, and the abuse of power, the way he would go after people. He would call people names. In fact, President Trump called me quite a few names.
Called himself. You a nasty woman.
Oh, nasty! He called me crazy. He called me. I have a lot of hate from Fox News people, sure. And so it's not as though I plan to say the things that I say, but I am moved to say these things because the kinds of assaults on the body politic on a daily basis, the attacks on people who he didn't agree with, or didn't agree with him, I should say, were constant. And it was really important to stand up to him. I began to use my voice more. And as I used my voice and became more myself, and that was, people know that I swore. I just didn't do it in public, and now it kind of comes out, but it is me. And I think that, I liked your article where you say, why is it that it's more acceptable for men to show their anger and to swear, but it's still not acceptable for women so much? Hey, women, we have a lot to be angry about.
Yeah, I think your teacher said, he was very good, because he said, it's one thing to swear at someone in a mean way, to bully them and demean them and make them feel horrible, but that you were expressing yourself, you were expressing anger, which is,
yes,
fine. And he was your ardent defender from probably the 4th grade on up, which is very touching to me.
Very, Mr. Oshiro, he's a gem. But there have been whole books written on women and anger and women expressing anger. And I think it is important that the injustice that's all around us, that should be expressed. And there are a lot of people, strangers, who used to come up to me in the pre-COVID days, and I would be in New York, or there would be a lot more traveling that we did. And people would just come up to me and thank me for the way I spoke very plainly about the challenges and anger and frustrations that they felt in their lives. And that I spoke to that in a very genuine way. Why? Because it was genuinely felt by me. So, I will continue to speak out in what I call a very plain way. I don't use a lot of metaphors. I don't use Senate speak. I just say it the way I believe. It's the way I want to communicate, and I think I do very plainly.
There's a question, really, it's a comment in here now saying from Donna Chung. So she is saying, we're so, capital letters, glad you use your voice.
Yeah,
So
we all have
from Donna. Yes. But your voice became especially strong during the Kavanaugh hearing when Brett Kavanaugh was in your Judiciary Committee, of which you're a member, and you famously said then, which I think won you the heart of most of America's women, you said that all this trouble is really coming, meaning sexual harassment and sexual abuse from men. So why don't you stop it, men? And you were interviewed by someone and you said, it's time for you to stand up and shut up. I can't quote it exactly, but
that was certainly not planned or thought through, by the way.
no. Yeah, that
I was asked by a reporter whether the women on that committee, and there were only 3 women on that Judiciary Committee, all Democrats, whether we had some sort of special responsibility to take up the cause of Dr. Ford and just sexual harassment, assault. And I just said, why is it always the women who are being asked to clean up? So I just said, look, the people who are perpetrating these kinds of acts of sexual assault, sexual harassment, it's the men in this country. So all you men out there, shut up and step up and do the right thing for a change. And so that is very much the misogyny, the gender disparity and discrimination is still with us, Danby. I'm just glad that there are so many more women who are standing up to it, and especially all the women who ran for the U.S. House. I'm just so proud of all these mainly minority women who are just really articulate, and they're such fighters. But people need to know that there are a lot of women out there. We need to express the outrage that we feel, not that we're just going to do that and not get anything done. Note that in spite of the fact that I speak the way I do, that my COVID-19 bill passed with bipartisan support, except for 1 no vote from a single Republican. And that didn't just happen because, we can't work with Mazie because she swears. No, I worked hard to garner the support of the Republicans. And it was one of the first bills that we got passed in a bipartisan way just recently.
What does that bill do?
What it does is it really acknowledges the fact that hate crimes against the Asian American Pacific Island community had gone up during the COVID times. And what it does is it requires or really supports reporting of these kinds of crimes and incidents with the help of the U.S. Attorney General and the law enforcement in the states and counties, so that we have a much better idea and data as to the prevalence of these kinds of crimes, so that we can prevent them and prosecute them. And so that was, we all saw the videos of Asian, mainly women, being beaten up, and it was horrible. And what it led to was not only the passage of this bill, and for once Congress standing up and saying, we stand with the AAPI community, we condemn these kinds of hate crimes, but it also led to companies, for example, doing bystander training. I talked to UPS leaders who said they are training their drivers. Their drivers are all over to, if they see something like this happening, to report it, to maintain their own safety, of course, but to do something, because we all saw the videos of people being beaten up and bystanders not doing anything. So bystander training, so much more awareness, and so many Asian leaders stepping forward to say, we can no longer be the invisible community, because Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, had long been really ignored, I'd say. So no longer. And any minority community that is targeted for these kinds of crimes should be supported. That includes the Jewish community that was targeted, and the Muslim community, obviously. So there's a lot of racial issues in our country that we need to address.